Welcome, Piano Craft Tribe. It's so good to see all of you today. We are going to have an awesome class today. Jacob Putnam, RPT, is going to go over, we're doing upright hammers, squaring, spacing, all things hammers. So I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thanks. Yeah. So I think was it you, Jeff, that asked about this particularly, or okay, good. Um, it's a good idea. I'm not sure if we have talked about it before, but either way, it's a good way to review it. Um, I I have to admit though, when when we set it up, when we named it, I did kind of mislead that a little bit. So, um, does anyone know the proper order, just right off the bat, of um, those three things that we're talking about: squaring, spacing, and traveling? Uh, what is the proper order of that, first of all?
Travel, rotate, space.
Perfect. Yeah. Yeah. Traveling. Now, traveling in particular, you have to do that first. The other two, you kind of do it at the same time, um, but we'll talk about that. But traveling, in my opinion, you have to do that first. And as you're regulating, especially in a grand piano, you might want to look at it again. Um, the PTG even says you might want to do it 3 or 4 times through the regulation process. You definitely want to look at it several times when you're rehanging hammers, especially then. But Jeff, now I did want to ask you. So you were saying that it was your mother or mother-in-law's, and I didn't know if it was a grand or an upright. So I wanted to make sure that we addressed that.
Oh, I don't remember what I said. I don't recall. I don't remember saying anything about my mother or mother-in-law.
Might have been someone else then.
I don't remember.
Fair enough.
I don't think it was me.
Okay. Well, my mistake. Well, either way, the principles that are here are also on a grand, but we do want to make sure that we talk about it because it's sometimes it's flipped. So you just got to be aware and just kind of think through that. So so let's talk about squaring. No, Siri. Sorry. Okay, let's talk about traveling then. Oh, I guess first of all, let's talk about tools that you'll need. Obviously, you're going to need a screwdriver. If you're taking off the shanks, then you'll probably need something to like a shank starter. And I don't know why it's getting fuzzy there. Hold on. Is there an effect? There's an effect. Turn that off.
There you go.
Hey, that's better. Okay. You'll need travel paper or some sort of something to travel. So travel paper kind of looks like if you get it from Chaff or somewhere else, they usually look like this. There's usually some sort of adhesive on the back that you kind of like a stamp or an envelope, and you lick it and then it sticks. That's the most common one that you can buy. It will come in 2 different sizes. I just have the thinnest one. Usually the larger one is blue, and they'll try to color code it so you don't mix it up. Or you can double it up. So You don't have to. Another way of doing it is using tape, but you do have to cut it. It's kind of debatable of the longevity of tape and adhesive on that. So I'll throw that out there. It's not widely accepted, but sometimes when you don't have any travel paper and you have roll tape, that is better than not doing it at all. So when you're doing a grand piano, you need some sort of square, a straight edge, or like a flat table. With a upright, you can use the rest rail, or you can just use a ruler or a straight edge. Other than that, oh, and lastly, for burning, there's many different ways of burning, but the basic thing that you probably want to throw in your toolkit today, if you don't have it, is have some sort of lighter. I like this kind that kind of has a little bit of a longer nose, but yeah, so that's basically it. Okay, so traveling. So traveling is necessary, really, because it's impossible to drill everything perfectly and to hang everything perfectly, have everything set, the glue sets, it kind of moves everything around. So in my experience, you can't get it perfect just from the factory. So traveling usually is well, at least it's necessary for when to compensate for those imperfections in manufacturing or remanufacturing. So let's see, how do I want to do this? Kind of improvising today, guys. So bear with me. And any questions, please feel free to jump in. I want this to be a discussion. I have notes and I have my experience, and I really want to make sure that you guys can understand. So sometimes the things that are in my head doesn't really translate into the words, because words are hard. So just let me know. Okay. So traveling, the spec for traveling. Well, I guess traveling, the definition of traveling is the movement. You're ensuring the movement of when it's at rest to when it's at a striking position, that isn't moving laterally one way or the other, especially in relationship to the next hammers. So that is literally, it's when it's moving, when it's traveling. So actually, when I was starting off, that kind of, I don't know why I got that a little confused with the rest of these, but traveling itself is when it's moving. So at rest, and then when it's moving forward, you want those you want the hammers to be parallel with each other, and it's not moving left or right. Often you'll see in a grand piano, actually here, I'll show this. Okay, this is, just to give credit for it, this is the grand regulation book, but I'm going to steal the picture that's here. So you can kind of see, let's see, does that show? Yeah, it does. So at rest, this image right here, that's at rest. So you can see that it looks like everything's square, everything's fine, everything looks great. But as it moves up, things start getting weird. So as it's traveling towards the strings, it's moving left or right, which is not what you want.
Right, because you don't want lateral left or right movement on the hammers. You want those hammers to be evenly spaced all the way through that movement.
Correct. That's exactly right. Often when you're hanging hammers, on a grand piano especially, it's a lot easier to travel when you don't have the hammer heads on yet. And so you're just traveling the shanks up and down. The process is the same, but it's a little easier. So I'm going to move this. So let's talk about the upright then first. Bear with me, sorry. I hope you don't get sick.
It'll be better than my attempt the other day when I was I was trying to use my camera, but it would do the opposite way of what I would move it. It was so hard the other day. Oh, this is good.
Okay, I hope that.
Yeah, this is good.
Okay, so we just walked up to the piano. Usually, again, you can use the rest rail, and you can kind of watch. So you're watching for things to move left or right. A trick that I use actually, and I don't know, some people have expressed that it's a little bit difficult, but if you blur your eyes just a bit, you look past it and kind of just blur your eyes, you can kind of see patterns a little bit better. So I can see right here that is separating just a bit. So not even diagnosing which one is moving, you can kind of just see that the gap is getting wider. I don't know if you can see that.
Do you traditionally, for your process, mainly look at the hammer butts as opposed to the top line of the hammer felts?
Yes. I like to keep an eye on both. So you're kind of watching both sides. Is that what you're saying? Like,
right. I didn't know whether you had a process where you look at one, look at the other, and then kind of look at the thing as a whole, or whether you kind of really focused on the backside first.
Yeah, honestly, you want to watch all of it, but it is easier, at least in traveling. I'm kind of looking down in this direction, just straight down at this. And I'm just trying to see what's moving, what's separating. And see, this is a pretty old piano. I haven't done anything to it, so it's actually, I haven't looked at it. I haven't tuned it yet. So I don't know. Can you see that? Can't see that. It's this one right here. Get a little bit more head on. No.
What are you seeing that you were gonna? What do you think you're seeing?
Yeah, I can't see it on the camera for some reason. And maybe it's the advantage of having a three-dimensional view of this, right? Instead of two. But right here, what I'm seeing, if I can exaggerate it, I'm seeing it like this, where there's everything seems to be lined up. Those gaps right here and here are kind of going like this. They're
I
separated.
can see it slightly, but that was hard for me to find.
Yes, and it is. It's barely anything for this piano.
Travel it one more time and see whether I can see that.
Yeah, maybe with the straight edge, maybe that'll show it more. But
Yeah, I
See
can
it
see
when
it.
it's all the way
It's
forward.
really
Yeah.
hard to see on the camera, but yeah, I see what you're talking about.
Yeah, it spreads a little.
Jacob, have you ever taken off the hammer rest rail so that
Oh,
you
yeah.
have easier access to the flange screws to actually remove and then put the tape inside?
Not for traveling. Let me think about that. Actually, when I'm hanging hammers, yeah, I don't usually when I'm hanging the hammers, so after I've hung the hammers, the rest rail is there when I'm hanging the hammers. So I yeah, I don't think I've taken it off for that particular reason. Although, as a tip, if you're hanging hammers, if you're doing a set of hammers and also the dampers, definitely do that. Take off the rest rail, have that away so that as you're regulating the dampers, that is way easier to deal with. Oh, the other way. Okay, let's go back here. Okay.
Because it seems like getting to those flange screws would be pretty much a nightmare with the jacks in the way and the hammer rest rail right there as well.
I think it depends on the model. Usually with uprights, I mean, obviously a spinet is going to be terrible, but usually when you're getting in there, it's just a matter of pushing the jack just a tiny bit over. You don't want to stress the center pin, but it's just a matter of going like that, and then you need to loosen it. So let's say we want to. So let's say we've diagnosed this. This is probably not enough. Well, okay, definitely it's not enough for me to actually do anything with it. So I probably wouldn't worry about it at this point. But let's just, for sake of argument, we'll just do it anyway. So in my opinion, I'm seeing it go this way. So it's going to the right. So the first thing you want to figure out, the first thing you want to think about, I guess, when you're doing this is on an upright, a grand is different, and it's easier for me to remember on a grand than an upright. But on an upright, you think of the flange is screwed up on the frame, so it screws this way, and then the hammer will go this way. So if it's traveling to the right, we want to put a piece of travel paper on one side or the other. So let's say if it's traveling to the right, which side of the flange do we want to put travel paper on for an upright? And then I'll grab some paper while we're talking about it.
Don't you put it on the right side? If it's traveling to the right, to veer it to the left more?
Yes, I think so. I hope so.
Okay, so I just want to talk through it. I'm not going to say whether it's right or wrong yet, because it's just. So think about the dimensions right here. So if I put like a big wedge of something, and it goes like this, then it's gonna travel left then, right? So if it's already traveling left, then if we put more on the left here, then it's going to wedge even more. Does that make sense? So if it's traveling to the right, if the hammer is traveling to the right here, we don't want to add to the right. And again, this is only uprights. So if
Yeah,
it's
because if I
traveling to the
remember
right,
right, uprights and grams are opposite.
yes, exactly. So an upright, and the reason why I'm talking the thought process of this is because instead it's kind of like I had a problem with math growing up. I was terrible at math, and it's because everyone said, here's the formula, remember it, whatever.
Yeah, this
I
is a
can't do
spatial
that.
geometry thing.
So if you can think through the process and remember, and then in the future, you know how it works. You don't have to remember, oh, okay, the formula to whatever. It works like this, right? At least in my head, this is how I think of it. So if it's traveling to the right, we need to correct it. So we're putting it to the left. We're adding material to the left so that it compensates and straightens out. One thing to keep in mind though, so I'll get there, but which one was it? That one. So the way to do this on an upright is you loosen it, but you don't remove the screw all the way. You're just loosening the hammer flange. Now it's really loose. I might need a flashlight, but oh well. And then you take the paper. And what I like to do actually is I haven't activated the adhesive yet, right? I haven't licked it. Mostly because I really want to see what it does. So I'm gonna put it in there and then see if it's made enough of a difference, if it's made too much of a difference. If it's going now to the left, then I'll remove it. If I'm happy with it after it's tightened down, then I'll lick it and put it in again. So we'll put that in there.
How many of you have done this before?
I've taken it completely off and out to
Okay.
do it. I've not done it while in the piano, and I'm still define right and left.
Yeah.
Your right as you're looking at the piano. This is that question on the PTA that drove me nuts because it's like put
Yeah.
it in the direction that the hammer is traveling, and then it's opposite. It's like
Yeah.
That's
I
why
sweat that one, and I could have
Jacob
sworn I got it
was
right.
talking it through the way he was, so that you're facing the piano like you're servicing the piano.
Right.
If it's angled this way, you want to correct for it. So where do you have to put the paper to get that back to level?
Yeah.
And think of it as
exactly
a teeter-totter. If this is the low point, you got to move this up. So think of it as a teeter-totter that has to move.
That's exactly right. I 100% that I agree that that question is terribly worded. I don't know why they haven't changed it yet. I've heard so many people complain about that particular question because it's confusing with left and right and whatever. But it's relative, right? In that way. So again, the reason why I'm doing it this way is because I'm making a model in my head larger than life, right? Of the relationship of this piano to the strings. And so again, because it was striking this way, and to me it was to the right, but I'm putting it on the left side of the screw, and then I'm leaving it hanging out. I actually missed, but usually, okay, so you leave it hanging out and then you test it again.
Okay, now you confused me because you said right earlier, or did you?
Well,
now
the direction that it's traveling, the direction that it's hitting is to the right, so you need to move it left.
Right.
So if it's one direction, you have to bring it so that it's back level again. So you got to where do you have to shore it up to make something level? So think of a tipping mailbox. If the mailbox is going this way, which direction do you have to move it? And where do you have to shore up the base to get it to tilt the right direction?
Yeah.
I'm just overthinking it. So
Maybe.
Left, right.
It might be one of those things you just need to do it a bunch of times just to get used to, just the kinesthetics of it more than anything.
Okay, I know it kind of looks weird, but Robert, seriously, like, let's do it with your hands. Like, just think it through. Literally, this is how I do it. I have to think things through with my hands, spatially. I just like, this is how I figure things out, and it translates into other things. But seriously, like, if you can do that right now with me, let's figure it out right now, Robert. You still there? He's gone.
no, I'm here. No, I'm here. I've got my little prop. I'm working in it in my mind. I'm going, it's just the right left thing. I've done this and done it correctly, but it's the right left thing. That's why I take it out. I'm a visual learner. If I could see it in my hands, I'm going, okay, yeah, because I've done it wrong. I've done it right. But
I think that's a good idea.
If I just have to verbalize it, I'm probably going to screw it up.
Okay,
I have to get hands on.
Yeah, and that definitely makes sense. That you need to kinesthetically be touching it and moving it around to get the orientation right.
Okay,
I always think of it like think of the flange, where the flange is hitting the mounting rail, and how those are like flush together. And if I put something in between on one side, it's gonna tilt it out, in or out.
Yeah,
so I don't know if that helps, but that's kind of what I think about.
Yeah, let's talk about it like this then. So, the hammer is going to be facing away from you, right? There's a screw that goes right there, and then it mounts to the rail right there. So if that's traveling, let's say, how can I illustrate that? I almost have to face it the other way also, because I can't do it like.
Yeah, then it's easier to explain it. Yeah, do it that way.
There we go. Yeah, okay, that makes more sense. So let's say this is traveling. This is straight. We'll say this is straight. Now it's this way, traveling this way. In theory, there's nothing there anyway. And you can see it hasn't been traveled before. There's no paper here. So this is flat. This is parallel to this. But this is twisting. So you need to change. You can't change the rail. So you just need to shim. So you're shimming on either the left side or the right side. Now, if it's going to the right, that means it's almost like there's something here on the right side. So to compensate, you need to shim to the left to twist it back. So on an upright, it is more straightforward that way. It's if you need it to go left, then you're going to put it on the left, right? If it's twisting to the right, you need it to go this way, so you put it on the left side. Now, on a grand piano, it's the opposite. So, just for illustrative purposes, we'll just say this is a grand piano, right? So say it's traveling to the right on this one, but it's mounted to a rail like this. So it's horizontal now. So if it's traveling to the right, now it almost seems like it's this way. So you can imagine like a line going like this. So if we need, and this is where it gets confusing, right? If we need it to move left on a grand piano, it's the opposite. We need to put it on the right side. So we're adding material right here, and then it pushes it back up. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. Sorry to break that down. I just, when you
No,
see it, you
helpful.
can figure it out.
Absolutely.
No,
Because
that was a good demonstration. You being behind the camera. That worked.
yeah, that was helpful because naturally I want to do it one way, but then it's different on a grand. So then I have to like
Yeah.
think through it like you said, or I naturally would do it wrong, I think. Yeah.
And again, like I've always had that problem of, you know, someone says, okay, it's a grand and it's different with an upright. And so that kind of information, again, I have ADHD, so that goes away. I don't remember those kind of things. But I can figure out how the mechanism is supposed to work. And that's why I present it in that way. There's so many ways, again, I'll say it again, to do this craft. There's so many different ways of doing it. So I'm just presenting the way that I do it. But that's also the way that I think through that process. So you kind of have to go, okay, this is a grand piano and it's going like this. So I need to go the opposite. With an upright, it is a little bit more straightforward that way. So okay. So after let's say we've decided which way we need to go. So basically I'm going to put the travel paper on the side that it needs to be. I'm going to screw it back down to the rail, but I'm going to leave it hanging. And then I'm going to check to see if that's better. So again, I'll go, all right, yeah, that's better. Maybe it needs more. So if you have the larger size paper, then you can take this out and put the larger size, or you can just double this up. But let's say that you're happy with that. So it's already screwed down to the rail. What you do at this point is you just rip it. Oh, actually, I did say that I haven't activated the glue yet, right? So the first thing is, I guess, is to unscrew it just a bit, take it out, lick it. Now, the one thing you want to keep in mind is you want to put the adhesive on the flange, not the rail, because that's going to mess up traveling in the future. So you're gluing it to the flange, not the rail. So you're making sure which side that's on. You glue it on, and then you tighten it back down. Now, with that tightened, I don't know why I put the emphasis on "d." Then you just rip it, and it's just because that's tightened right there. It's going to rip right where the rail is, and it's out of the way. And then you have the rest. You use the rest of it.
Question, Jacob.
Yes.
Where are you in? Is it easier to get the tape in from the top of the hammer or from the bottom?
It really depends. I usually try on the top, but sometimes it is a lot easier to get in. The problem with the bottom is you're trying to get past the bend, because most of the rails you're kind of there's a lip, and it kind of butts up against the bottom of that lip. And so when you unscrew it, you're trying to get up and then bend up into the rail. So you kind of have to work against that. I usually like to, at least I'll try first going top down, Sometimes it's easier if you're having trouble getting it in there, just using tweezers and guiding it in there instead of using the stiffness of the paper. Sometimes that's a pain. So tweezers help a lot with that. Let's see. I think okay, that's traveling, right? Traveling is first. The reason why we do traveling first is because once everything is moving the way it should, even though it might look a little twisted and uneven this way at rest, you have to do traveling first, because then everything else feeds off of that. So kind of like in regulation, right? You're doing let off, dip, and blow, right? And all of those correlate with each other. In the same way that everything will kind of twist and move with each other. So we've done traveling. The next thing, again, I do like to say that the next part is whatever. You can do the next two either way, but they will well, I don't know what I'm trying to say there. Last thing before I move on from traveling. Sorry. Make sure before you move on, double check to see if you can see paper. So when you unscrew the screw for your hammer flange, just take a peek, see if you can see any paper or anything. If it's traveling, if it's already been traveled and all it needs is to remove paper, then always opt for that as opposed to adding paper on the other side. In the same way that when you're doing paper punchings on center rail or the front rail, you're trying to use the least amount of paper punchings possible. So you're not using, you want to use like a 30 cardboard instead of 3 10s, because that feels different. And in the same way, it kind of gets unpredictable when you're adding multiple layers of travel paper. So just use the least amount of travel paper there. Okay. Okay, talk about squaring. Gosh, I'm long-winded, sorry. Squaring is often, you can call it like the angle of the hammers. I always call it burning. But it's the twist in the hammer itself when it's at rest. So the reason why it's called burning, so let's say these are traveling correctly, but it's kind of sitting like this. So the way to compensate for that is you need to heat up the hammer shank and then twist it in the direction that you want it to go, and then hold it there until it kind of cools off. I've never used an alcohol lamp. I really want to buy one, but I think that's better than using butane, because butane does burn. You'll eventually burn anything, right? Like if it's hot enough, you're going to burn the shanks anyway. That is the thing you want to avoid. So always, when you're warming up the hammer shanks, you're moving as much as you can. So if you can get down in there, and obviously you're trying not to burn anything else in the process. Let's see. Maybe I can zoom. Whee!
Victor, didn't you have a collection? What heat device do you use for this? What's your go-to?
I use a butane lighter, but it's kind of long and skinny, so I can get back a little further.
Yeah.
And I, like he's saying, keep it moving. What I do is I move it back and forth, and I hear, like, as long as I'm hitting the shanks of the neighboring hammers, I know I'm moving enough, and I'm going up and down too. So just kind of like this zigzag motion, so that it's not staying in one spot.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I use a Weller Pyro pen that has a instead. It's normally a soldering iron, but it has a tip for shooting hot air, and so it's a butane, but it doesn't have direct flame. It's actually like a heat gun, but it's a mini heat gun.
I've seen those. Yeah.
It's very
I think
effective.
this is something similar to what Mike is talking about. It's like,
but mine's
got a little flame on the inside.
Yeah.
But it doesn't. It contains it. And I actually used this to, like, last week to I had put a little bit of lubricant on the center pin because the hammer was sluggish, and of course, putting a lubricant on there just makes it incredibly sluggish until it dries out. And the appointment was ending, and it was still sluggish. I'm like, I need that to dry out quicker, so I used this on low heat, and it wound up actually not scorching really anything, even though I got it within just a few millimeters of the wood.
Nice. That's awesome. I'm gonna mess up my piano here just for the sake of argument. So I've also done a recipe down here, but I'm just gonna go up and down, and I'm twisting, and then I kind of hold it.
Yeah.
It looks like.
Now
Are you doing it above the hammer rest rail, Jacob?
Yeah, I'm going like this.
Oh, okay. I go under.
Yeah, I've done under, but you don't get a lot of movement here.
Yeah.
Especially if you have a longer one, it is easier to go from the top. But the reason why I use this one is because it can go it's really small. It goes in my pack and it doesn't take any space. I do have a longer one in the shop, and that's a lot easier. But do you see how exaggerated that is now?
Yeah, that's super easy to see now on camera how off it is. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, very common in the treble section.
Yes, it's a lot more obvious to see in the treble section as well. You can start seeing that instead of being straight, the hammers start to angle a little bit as you go. So it gets harder to see that kind of thing. If you just align your vision with that, then you'll be able to see that better.
Question.
Anyway, so that's squaring or burning. Again, after traveling. So this is terrible, right? So
what was your question, Janice?
Jacob, can I ask you a question?
Yes, please.
Okay, so let's say we're not going to be changing the hammers or resurfacing the hammers, but the hammers already have grooves. If you turn that head, then those strings are not lining up with that hammer like it did before. Is it better to leave it so that it still plays all those strings the same, or to move it?
So let's say, okay, so this is kind of where the philosophy of it comes into play. Let's say I come to a piano. This is what I find, right? That there's a completely twisted one hammer that's out of the way. That is affecting how it's going to play, and you can't leave it that way. You can't even tune it that way. So you have to do something about it. In that case, you probably have to. You have to move it. But generally, in my opinion, at least what I do, is any of these three things, just in someone's home, it's going to affect the voicing, and often it affects the regulation. It's if you have deep grooves, it's going to change the alignment of that, and it's going to sound muffled, really strange compared to everyone else. So you have to add that time into the repair, right?
This is what I had posted earlier. If you see something, should you change it, and is it going to change back? And you had mentioned, are you voicing?
Yeah.
I think this was particularly the thing that was on mind.
Yeah.
Was that, should I change it? Is it going to mess up the sound? Is it going to twist back at some point?
Yeah, I mean, it is. It totally will. So it's a matter of like, okay, just being aware that that's going to change the voicing. It's going to muffle it a lot. And maybe your client won't notice, but it might be better if you are upfront about it and say, this is going to change that. We can really, this piano needs to be, we need to reshape the hammers and then voice it. And this can be part of that process. That's more of that conversation. I feel like that would be a better way to go. But yeah, again, let's say we walked up, this is this piano, this is like this. I probably will talk to them first. But if they still, they're like, no, I don't want to do regulation. I mean, I don't want to do hammer reshaping. I don't really want to do any of that. All right, well, okay, I'm just gonna do this then. It might be a little bit muffled, but we need to get this working. So I'm just gonna burn this really quick. We're gonna go. So in that case, again, being upfront about it is a better philosophy. So let me fix this. Does that answer your question? I'm sorry.
I think so, but it's kind of a matter of degree.
Yes.
If the hammers are working as they are, so just to make them aesthetically, even, might change the voicing of the hammer.
Right.
I think it would be better to leave it as it is, so you don't change the voicing if it's working properly.
Yeah, and that's
Correct.
where, I guess, to your point, Jacob, that's where you have a quick conversation with the customer and see what their feelings are, because they may say, yeah, go ahead and try to make it better, or they could say, no, just leave it as is, and we'll look at it another time.
Right. Again, I tend to, if it's not affecting the mechanism, or if it's not going to prohibit you from tuning the piano, then I probably wouldn't bring it up unless it's part of a conversation of full regulation and like a good workover. Otherwise, yeah, it's a longer conversation that they probably won't understand, honestly.
Yeah. Well, I'm working with these 100-year-old pianos, and sometimes it's best to leave it as it is.
Usually,
Just because it's been doing this for 100 years,
right.
and perfectionism isn't on the forefront of your mind on some of these. Just making them work is in the forefront of my mind. And so if it plays and it sounds good, if you're missing one of the strings, that might be a different matter. But
Right.
if it's hitting all three strings, I would tend to leave it alone, because
Yeah.
I don't need to break something that's 100 years old that I may not be able to replace.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
I think I agree with that. Yeah. Okay. With burning, with alignment, well, the thing you want to be looking at is, again, you're watching the twist, so the gap of right at the top of the hammer and the bottom compared to its neighbors. So that would be burning. Again, there's lots of different ways of burning, but that's ultimately it's heating up the shank and twisting it and holding it there until you get to where you need it to be. And then the last one is alignment. Now, the spec for alignment is, like you were saying, we want it to be centered to the string, but the thing that no one really talks about is aesthetically that does kind of change things sometimes, and getting most of the time the strings aren't actually spaced perfectly unless they're unless you have like agraffs or there's different ways, but it's usually the spacing isn't perfectly on the strings, so it translates into there are gaps in the hammers also. So when you're aligning, you're doing a little bit of a compensation between those two. You want it to be ultimately you want all three strings hitting as centered as you can. But I think if you can fudge it just a little bit and keep it on the three and move it over just a little bit so that it looks aesthetically where it's more evenly spaced, then that's usually the way that I rather tend to go. And in that same vein, I think you're right. I'm not going to move it in a regular tuning. I'm not going to do these things unless it really is affecting the tuning. But so again, this is more like you're doing that repair or you're hanging hammers. The way that you have just align is that again you're unscrewing that flange and you're kind of moving it over. Usually, if it's too far over, well, usually when you tighten it, it will kind of come back to where it was. So I kind of push a little bit against its neighbor, tighten it down, and then usually that'll be enough. There are also tools that you can use that will you put it in between the hammer flanges and it will push it. But I often see that kind of affects the neighbor as well because you're using the neighbor as leverage. Let's see if I can like simulate that. Let's see. Okay, let's see. So like, if I want this one, I'm above the screw, and I'm just kind of pushing it. So I'm twisting it this way. So now it's pushed this way, but it's also pushed the neighboring hammer over in the wrong direction. So I've never really, I don't know. Maybe I'm using that tool wrong. I was just using a screwdriver here, but I've never used that tool successfully. And I think just using your hands and a screwdriver is more accessible anyway. So that's how I've been doing that.
Have you ever used those flange spacer tools?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I was.
Oh, you're talking about the ones that you slip down. Do you slip them down from the top? Is that, you know what I'm talking about?
Oh. No, I don't think so. I don't think I've seen that. Where you come from the top?
I think it's the same style tool as what you're talking, or what you try to do right now, Jacob. I think you can do the same thing. Yeah, you slip it down from the top.
Oh, that's cool.
Are you talking about grands?
I'm not sure. I got the tools from somebody, and I've never used them, but I'm trying to figure out how to use them. Maybe they're for grands.
Yeah, with a grand, they do have hammer spacers, and it like on a grand piano. So it's mounted to the rail, and they kind of have these fingers right here. And so you kind of slip it in and then leverage it that way. That would be like this, right?
Yeah, because sometimes they didn't seem like they would be good for uprights anyway. Sometimes they're too tight to get in there anyway. So
yeah, I've never seen that. I don't know. From the top, I've never seen that. I have seen one it's basically like a flathead screwdriver, but it's way wider, and you set it on the side of the hammer flange like that, and then you leverage it like this.
Yeah, I might be making that up about coming from the top. I think I just assumed that's what you do with them.
I'd be interested. Anyway, so squaring and spacing ends up being pretty much the same. I usually do that at the same time. So, like, if it's twisted, then I'll get it back into place, and then I'll move it over so that it's equal with its neighbors. And you're kind of doing that at the same time. For me, that's a lot easier. But I know a lot of people will do them in batches, right? And that is also a way of doing that.
I have a question, Jacob.
Yes.
If you're going to be filing the hammers, do you like to do this before or after?
After.
So
okay. you're filing the hammers. You're getting it. Well, okay. Here's the thing, I guess. If you're doing gang filing, you do want to address things that are twisted and things out of the way first. So get the worst ones out first, and then come back to it. But gang filing does depend on it being straight and level and everyone being.
It's kind of where you're doing a rough alignment and spacing really quickly to get everything more or less in shape, then do the filing, then come back and do a fine tuning on it.
Right. I call it a pitch raise for regulation. Yeah. If you do a rough regulation, I call it a pitch raise regulation. If you need to pitch raise, but if you need to rough it in first to do that, then do that first.
A chip spacing.
Yeah, that's better.
There you go. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Usually we do a lot of these for schools, so I usually will just take them out of the piano and go off of the string grooves for alignment. Do a rough pass, file, and then do a final pass once it's back in. Because you're never going to get it perfect outside of the piano.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. And that's basically it. So I do have a trick. I think a lot of times you can kind of just keep chasing it. If you just go, okay, this section, I gotta I'm just focusing in. This has got to be right, and often you can just keep chasing it over and over again, and you don't really have an end. So I like to do it where, you look for the 5 worst hammers. In all of these cases, you're going for, okay, traveling. In this section, I'm going to pick 5 hammers that are the worst. I'm going to fix those, and then I'm going to move on. And then I'm going to move on. 5 here, 5 there, and then reevaluate. And then I go, okay, there still needs to be more. And then pick 5, and then come back. Usually when you're doing it that way, you end up actually feeling like you get to a end point. And it's one of those things like university technicians tend to we can talk about perfection, and I'm not saying that this is a compromise, but it's a way of actually living what we're doing, right? This is we actually have to make a living for what we're doing. And when you're sometimes like a university technician, they can do that forever. That's fine. Or if you're like a Shigeru Grand technician, go for it. You can take months. But,
regular for 80 hours.
Yeah. But usually, at least in my experience, I haven't been able to do that. So
that's the same technique I do for lost motion. Is I'll find which hammers have the most. Well, first I'll find which hammers are actually resting on the jacks as opposed to the rest rail. I'll lower those down real quick, and then I'll find which ones have the worst lost motion just real quick, bring them up, go back through, find which ones are the worst, bring them up, rather than trying to spend forever on each note.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. I kind of do what go ahead, Jacob.
No, sorry. I was just going to say that I call it the rule of 5s, but I'm just trying to put a cap on my perfectionism, because I would love to, but I have to be realistic.
Yeah,
So.
One of the workshops I went to, Lucy Erlacher out of St. Louis was talking about, you have to find that stopping point for when is it going to be next time that you see the piano that you start looking at it again.
Right.
So you have to find that end point. And I like your method of just picking 5 per section, maybe repeat it a couple of times, and then that's your done point.
Yeah. That's my thinking on that. But
yeah. Have you ever loosened hammer flanges, the pin, by moving a hammer over too hard, trying to get it to space? Like you're saying, sometimes it doesn't want to go, so you'll just push it real hard, and then you end up making that pin loose.
Oh, not with my hands. I haven't ever pushed hard enough where I've hurt the pinning on the next one, or the current one. I have, when I was trying to do it with a screwdriver. That's where I did put too much leverage on it. I don't know why though. But
I've done it. I've done it before with my hand.
I can think of where I've busted out the bird's eye and I've had to repair that. And
okay.
Not fun.
Okay, I've never broken a bird's eye, but I've pushed it. Yeah, you kind of want to go past or until it hits the neighbor. But I've pushed it so far that it kind of eases the felt inside of in the flange, and then I got to repin it because it's too loose.
Oh yeah.
I've had to do that. So yeah, I guess I'll just be careful. Don't go too far.
Yeah, just be aware that that's a possibility, I suppose.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Okay. That is traveling, squaring, and spacing. I would double check again the traveling once I've done that, and then
I think your mic just died.
You just lost your sound, Jacob. Wow, that was crazy timing. Oh my gosh. That was amazing.
Yeah, I'll add one more thing about what I was talking about a second ago. I have where you say there's a hammer that you're trying to space, and like you keep pushing it and it doesn't want to go to where you want it, then it may be a loose flange. I've done that where I keep pushing it more and more and it just won't go, and it's like it doesn't want to stay, but it might be that the flange is loose and you may have to repin it. Yeah. But sometimes, I'm in my head, I'm like, I don't want to repin it, so I'll just keep pushing it more. And I was like, I can get it over a little more, but then I always end up having to repin it anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. Have a set of pins. Don't be afraid to do it.
Wow.
We make mistakes.
Well, thank you so much, Jacob. That was amazing. That made me a little overwhelmed though, but wow, that's so much work to do. Like how much I got to do my upright sitting right here. And I'm like, that's, yeah.
Okay. I didn't mean to do that.
No, I just, actually, no. Do you know what it did?
Really it's not a big deal.
What it did was make me think.
Try experimenting, but it's not really, it's not that bad. But I do like thinking about the philosophy of working through it.
I think so. What it made me do is want to actually try it, though, is what I'm saying. Like, I've been like, And now I'm like, you actually explained it in a way that I think I could try it, and get it, just practice it. So that was awesome.
Nice.
I'm a one of so.
Yeah. No, what you're saying, Jacob, about picking the worst ones and then do a little more. I always think about my barber does this. He kind of starts off real close and he'll do a little bit, and then as the haircut goes further along, he gets further and further away to see how it looks. And I realize I do that. I'll do that. I'll get kind of on top of it. I'll do the worst ones and then do that pass and scoot back a little bit, take another look, and then eventually I'm 3 or 4 feet away with one eye closed, eyeballing each one to try to get it perfect. Yeah, so. I would say just keep working your way back until it all looks good. Yeah.
It's really good.
Yeah.
Oh, well, thank you so much. We will let you know we're going to have class next. We're trying to do weekly right now. So post these. So we'll keep you updated. Thank you so much. Have a great rest of your day, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Hey, Stacy.
Thanks, Jacob. Thanks.